Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunshine Week webinar this morning. My name is David Bordewijk, and I'm the Executive Director for South Dakota News Media Association based in Brookings. And so we're very glad to have all of you joining us on board this morning online. I know we've got several already online and more coming in, but in the interest of time and given it is 10 o'clock, we are going to get started. We're really excited and pleased to bring you this Sunshine Week event today. As I said, this event is sponsored by South Dakota News Media Association, specifically our First Amendment Committee. South Dakota News Media Association represents the state's newspapers as well as digital news outlets in our state. And our First Amendment Committee, a long-standing committee of our organization, which is chaired by Mark Watson, who is managing editor at the Black Hills Pioneer and Spearfish. Its mission of the committee is to promote freedom of information, government transparency, and First Amendment issues, both here in South Dakota and elsewhere. And this is an example of the good work that committee does. And so we appreciate you joining us. And we're really excited to have today someone to share with some thoughts and ideas and talk about open government issues, someone who really is an expert in this field. And so we are very pleased to have him with us today. And joining us is David Coulier, who is with the Brechner Center in Florida. And I'm just so pleased that he was able to take time on his busy schedule to spend a few minutes with us this morning talking about open government and why it's so important. Let me just take a minute to give you a brief introduction for David before I turn it over to him. David is the director of the Joseph L. Brechner Freedom of Information Project and co-director of the Brechner Center for Advancement of the First Amendment at the University of Florida. He has served as national president of the Society of Professional Journalists in 2013 and 14, and he was president of the National Freedom of Information Coalition from 2019 to 2023. He currently serves on the Federal Freedom of Information Act Advisory Committee under the National Archives and Records Administration, and he has testified before Congress at least 3 times on FOIA issues. And so if there's anyone in the United States who's well-versed in this topic, it is David Coulier, and we're just very pleased to have him with us. David, welcome. It's great to have you. I like your background, green, leafy, mossy trees. That looks pretty nice from here in South Dakota this morning.
Yeah, it's a nice day here in Florida, Gainesville, Florida. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, awesome. David, we're doing this event in conjunction with Sunshine Week, which is a national observance, national celebration. Could you just take a minute to explain what Sunshine Week is and why that's so important?
Yeah, Sunshine Week's been around since 2005. It was created by the Knight Foundation and the American Society of Newspaper Editors. So they got it going. It built on what was once called Florida Sunshine Sunday that newspapers in Florida did, and they made it national. And the whole objective is to promote the right to know, to educate the public and everybody on the value of access to government information. And so through the years, it's provided a variety of content and coordination. ASNE turned into News Leaders Association, and they will be disbanding, unfortunately, in June. So they handed it off to us at Brechner, and we're going to try our best to continue it and continue spreading the gospel of FOI.
Well, very much appreciated. Thank you for taking on that and carrying that forward. I know here in South Dakota, many of our member newspapers and news outlets in our association, as well as others, have done some good things this week promoting Sunshine Week, including editorials and columns and cartoons within the newspaper. And so it's really good to see, and we appreciate that so much. So listen, we're going to jump right in here in the interest of time. And I will add that we plan to leave some time for some Q&A toward the end. You can put your comments, your questions in our chat here as we move along, and we'll try to get get to some of those questions. But I want to start with talking about, based on reading some of the research and the studies that you have published and the work that you've put out, David, assessing open government across the nation, across the United States, and particularly state by state, at the state government level. I notice time and again, South Dakota ranks pretty low on that list. Not surprising to many of us in this state in terms of that low ranking for government transparency. In fact, one of the studies I saw had it South Dakota at 48th on the list. So I guess with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit. Why is South Dakota so low on the list? And then maybe what is it we can do to maybe kind of try to move up the list as well. So.
Absolutely. Happy to go through that. I'll go through I'll show you the research on some slides here. So I'll share my screen and get that going, and make sure to save a lot of time for questions and discussion, because, it's, my message is a little negative and a little of doom, but I also want to provide solutions and hope by the end of this. So that's kind of what I hope we can accomplish today. So let's just start through it. Of course, everybody here probably understands the importance of open government. We know by research it reduces corruption. We know a study shows that it improves our drinking water quality when municipalities are being looked at and scrutinized. We know it creates safer restaurants, according to research, that sex offenders are less likely to reoffend. We know it provides parents school choices. They see the information that's provided and they make choices for their children. All this is documented in the research. In fact, for every dollar spent on public records-based investigative reporting, society benefits $287. That's a study by an economist out of Stanford. We're talking saved lives, lower taxes, more efficient government. It's a practical benefit for society that everybody can get behind, no matter your party, no matter if you're in journalism or the government or the commercial sector. This matters. This matters for America. And of course, it's also about saving our government and protecting what we call a democracy or republic. So that's what it's all about. And that's why Sunshine Week promotes this. And if you haven't already, make sure to check out the website. We have a lot of cool stuff there that might be of interest to you. Material you could publish in your paper, editorial cartoons, columns, graphics. These are items that we have permission for anybody to republish, so go for it. We have tons of partners who have joined the cause, and I'm sure many of you in your state. We have events all around the country listed online, even puzzles, crosswords, FOIA, word scramble, videos, fun videos, all there on the website. So please check it out if you haven't already. So my message today: clouds are forming, and there's a steady decline in transparency in this country across the governments, local, state, and federal. One study, I looked at audits conducted around the country, and we know it varies widely, all the way down to compliance rate of about 29% by police departments for a simple crime log that are public. If you ask for that, chances are you're not going to get it. And that's pretty alarming. I surveyed journalists and others some time ago, and they indicated the key problems, which you all know: delays, excessive redaction, fees, that sort of thing, we keep running into over and over and over. And when I look at the data, in this case, I analyzed requests submitted through Muckrock, a nonprofit, about 133,000 requests submitted since 2010. And we look at the state and local compliance rate, the chance that you'll get what you ask for nationally across the states is declined from about half the time to about 31% of the time. And you see the trend, the downward trend. It is not good. And it's even worse at the federal level. Look at that. 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, you'd get it about half the time a record, now 13%. And even Department of Justice statistics show a similar trend downward. So this is an alarming trend that bucks presidents, politicians, parties, regardless of who's in charge. This is what's happening across America. And it varies by state. I mean, you could see where you have a pretty good chance of getting records out of Washington State or Connecticut. But you go down to Alabama and the odds get really low. If you're looking for South Dakota, there you go. Not looking good. So that's on the street, actual compliance with public record laws. That's not just rating the laws. So about a third of the time, you'll get something in South Dakota if you ask for it, on average. And you can kind of see there's also trends geographically. The worst states for transparency, for some reason, tend to be in the South. And frankly, we don't know why. A lot of us are studying that, but we're trying to figure out what it is. Is it political culture? Is it something else? That's something that we got to figure out. Because until we figure out, diagnose what's causing it, we can't find a cure. So that's what we have to work on. And even last few months, we did a study out of Breckner where we requested 7 records from each state, from their state agencies, and saw what happened. South Dakota did very poorly. We had a very difficult time getting records compared to other states. So this is also an indicator of the issue. And this is historically a problem. Here's studies that have been conducted rating the states over the past 20 years. And you see South Dakota has not fared well. Literally the worst state in the country in 3 studies. That's not cool. Notice its strength of law. So when you really look at it, you see South Dakota, its law is not very strong in relation to other states. So we're seeing more and more problems across the country. This session, this year, was particularly bad. Public record laws have been attacked and gutted in several states this year, Utah and elsewhere. Still pending legislation and exemptions that are really troubling. I mean, frankly, in 20 years of studying this and watching it closely, I don't think I've seen a year as bad as this one. So if you feel it's bad in South Dakota, if it makes you feel better, it's bad everywhere. And that's too bad. And part of it goes back to our laws. Our laws really aren't that good in the US. If there's an outfit that rates the national FOIAs across the country or world, about 139 nations have them. And the United States ranks 77 out of 139. That's not very good. We're in the bottom half of the world. Best laws in the world, interestingly, Afghanistan and Mexico. Now you think, well, just because you have a good law doesn't mean it's followed. I'm sure if I asked the Taliban for their emails, they wouldn't respond favorably. Just because you have a good law doesn't mean it'll be followed. But having a good law is a starting point, and we really should focus on our laws. So why is this happening? What is going on? Why the downward trend? Well, of course, look at that trend line. Looks similar to the compliance trend. That's the number of newsroom employees working out there, requesting records and fighting for access. And as we know, with our the decline in the media economic model, the newspapers, frankly, are a little less willing to sue for records. And government agencies know that. They know that there aren't strong forces pushing back like there used to be. And I think that's contributing to the problem. In fact, there was a survey of journalists that asked them, what do you need more training in? And what came out was more training in getting records and documents. And I think part of that's because so many agencies are just ghosting journalists, just ignoring them, not even saying no comment, won't even return their calls. But the only way they could get any information is to submit a public records request. And journalists crave more training in that. Of course, we used to have strong nonprofits pushing back and fighting for transparency, but those too have declined, also in line with our with our declining legacy media. Open the Government pretty much out of business. Sunlight Foundation out of business. News Leaders Association about to go out of business this June. Funding declines. This is really troublesome. When I even looked at press associations around the country, when you look at the 990s, most of them are struggling and going and having a difficult time. And they've always been the ones pushing hard for this. So that's troublesome. So it's time that we kind of band together. We really need to unite and coalesce, because if we don't, as Ben Franklin said, if we don't hang together, then surely we will hang separately. And, that rings true today as it did hundreds of years ago. And there are a lot of organizations out there that care about this. We have to kind of come together if for everybody who believes in good governance. Of course, the National Freedom of Information Coalition is one of those groups. There are coalitions, state coalitions all around the country, about 38 states. You'll notice I don't think there's really strength in the Dakotas on that. And that's something maybe we could focus on, building Coalition for Open Government in South Dakota. Two studies, one that I'm writing up now shows that states with coalitions for open government are more transparent. There's something about that seems to correlate with transparency. So that could help South Dakota a lot right there. There's muckrock.com. If you haven't checked it out, so actually a nonprofit, not commercial, but they can help folks out in South Dakota submitting requests. They have tons of resources. They're going gangbusters. So if there's any organization that's strong in this area, it's Muckrock, as well as Reporters Committee. So I encourage people to also tap into Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, which has an open government guide, a great explanation of South Dakota's laws and every state's law, as well as legal resources that can help you out if you get in a bind. So I suggest that. And then what else can we do to turn this around? Well, a couple studies indicate that mandatory attorney fee shifting is critical. The states that have it have better transparency, like Washington State. So when you sue for records, you win. The government is required to pay your attorney fees. It sends a message that people will not take the law lightly then, as well as stiff penalties, financial penalties, monetary penalties, like Washington State has. Several studies show that training of public employees increases compliance and transparency. There's a study in Brazil, study in Chile. There are 4 states that require all government employees to have training in FOI. So I think that's something that could help things in South Dakota. Definitely independent oversight would be helpful. There are a few states that have independent commissions where you could go to if you're denied records illegally and say, hey, they denied me, and the entity can make a decision and force the agency to provide the records, even penalize the agency. Connecticut, Pennsylvania, sometimes Illinois provides binding decisions. Ohio provides, through its court system, a method like that. That's really helpful, because then the average person, they can't afford to hire an attorney and sue the government usually. So we need alternative entities. And by the way, more than 60 nations in the world have such things in their laws. A strong coalition would help South Dakota. Strong journalism, of course. Now, there's not a lot we can do about that, but there's a study I'm writing up right now to submit to a conference in 2 weeks, where I found a clear relationship between declining journalism and secrecy. The states that have been hit the hardest with cuts in newsrooms are also the states where government secrecy is the worst. Now, it's not causal, it's correlational data, but it certainly points to the importance of strong journalism. I think anecdotally we know it matters. Now the data points are starting to show that. And of course, copy fees are the worst. If they can charge for search and redaction time, they pretty much can do whatever they want. Hey, you can have the records, but it'll be $10,000, and people go away. So we have to deal with that as well. There are a lot of resources. In fact, when I get out of here in a second, I'll put in the chat not only a PDF of these slides, but handouts with tons of resources, a 70-page handout. So a little beefy, and happy to always help. If anybody runs into problems, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at my email, coolyourd@ufl.edu. You can call me. I put my cell phone in there, although leave a message. If I don't recognize it, I won't answer it. I could provide this national level context if you're writing about denials. I can provide bombastic quotes for your stories. You know, you can't say the government's wrong, breaking the law and a bunch of goombas, but I can. So as well as chatting with folks in government agencies. I love to talk with government agencies and talk to people in the public sector. Happy to help if I can, if we can, and happy to now talk about stuff. So let's do that, shall we?
Yes, and I invite participants to, if you have questions, you can put them in chat or Q&A, preferably chat, but I mean, either is fine there. We'll try to get to them. David, thank you. Good, really good stuff. Covered a lot of ground really quickly there. You know, one of the things that kind of comes to mind when you look at the focus you had on in terms of where South Dakota ranks and some of the weaknesses, great weaknesses in our law. But one of the things I think that's tough to measure, to research, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, is just this whole idea of the political culture involved with this. I mean, you can have good, strong law, and we can certainly make arguments about we have a lot of weaknesses in our open records and open meetings laws, no doubt about it. But even if you have good law, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got good open government, because if you don't have a sort of that culture, that climate within government that promotes and is an advocate for openness and transparency, then those laws don't matter, correct?
Absolutely. Political culture, I think, is critical. I think it explains what you saw in that map. I think there are certain political cultures where they're consider the records theirs and say, you know, how dare you ask for this? Who are you? As opposed to other political cultures where the government folks realize, hey, I serve the people, and the people paid for these records through their taxes, and I'm paid to be a custodian of these records and keep them safe and let people come and see them when they want. That is really the attitude we should have. And unfortunately, that's not the attitude in a lot of jurisdictions.
You know, David, we have a lot of participants in this morning's session who are not journalists, which is great. I've got a lot of just citizens and folks who work in government who are participating in this, and I'm really excited and glad to see that. I'm going to flip it around just a second and ask this question from sort of a different point of view. What is there a trend, or have you looked at this idea of because I've seen stories about it, about requesters who become a nuisance in terms of requesting information. I mean, they just bombard, they swamp public officials, public offices with requests for records, and overwhelm government's ability in some cases to respond to all those. Is that a problem out there?
Oh, absolutely. It is a problem. Now, it's a small percentage of requests. By some studies, less than 3% of requests are vexatious or overly burdensome, or, you know, you name it. There's a whole bunch of terms for it: harassment, nuisance, blah, blah, blah. But they're a problem when they get them, right? And we saw that after the last presidential election. A lot of folks flooded county election offices with tons of public records requests to, you know, and they thought the election was stolen. So I think it's a legitimate, hey, I want to see what the government's up to. But it did burden a lot of county election offices. School districts getting flooded with requests. what's in your curriculum? What are you teaching my kids? Are you indoctrinating them? That's something that's been popping up. And there's always been gadflies who have always wanted to figure out what's going on. Now, that's a good use of public records. We want to know what the government's up to. But if it just bombards an agency and it stifles them and slows down other people in getting information, well, that's the problem. So what do you do about it? A lot of state legislatures have started passing laws about that. Like agencies can blackball you if you ask for too much, or even fine you, which New Jersey did recently, fined an 87-year-old woman for asking too much information. And of course, that is problematic as well. These laws can be abused. So I don't frankly have a solution for it yet, but I'm working on it. So I've teamed up with 3 other amazing researchers from Rutgers, Johns Hopkins, and University of London, and we're actually embarking on a study that we hope to have some idea of what works best without restricting the flow of information. We hope to have some answers by this fall. So it's a big issue. It's a timely issue. We need to come up with a solution. If we can, then that could dispense with fees, because really the only reason for copy fees is to handle those huge requests. That's how fees are used, to tell people, well, you can have all this, but it'll cost $10,000. So it forces people to hone their requests. If we had other ways of dealing with it, we wouldn't need copy fees. The reality is copy fees don't come close to making up the cost of processing records, less than 1% by one study. So they're really not there to help process requests. They don't even come close. So really the only reason they're there is to force people to hone their requests. And so we have to come up with a different solution for that, though.
Thank you. And that gets to one of the first questions we have in our own participants about fees in South Dakota. And sort of sometimes there's this sort of attitude or a thinking on part of a requester that, look, I'm entitled to this information. I shouldn't have to pay any fee whatsoever. And South Dakota has some decent law in terms of how fees are to be assessed for providing access and copy fees and so forth. Where it sort of gets into problems at times is obviously when an agency will say, look, the fee will include our attorney time to research whether or not this information should even be made available to you, let alone just directly the copy fees of actually tangibly making the record available. They will assess the fee to include, hours and hours of attorney time, which again, that can run into a big number real quick. And so that becomes a frustration in terms of what we deal with in South Dakota often.
Right. And there's a different way of thinking about it, right? Okay, so I know in the United States we're kind of a user fee country now, right? People, if you want to use a highway, pay a toll. Nobody else should subsidize your use of that interstate or highway. If you want to use a park, pay a fee, a user fee, because other taxpayers don't want to subsidize your use of that park. So it's kind of been this growing mentality. The problem with that thinking is access to public records is not using a park or a highway. It's interaction with our government. It's democratic civic engagement. And we have to set that into a different category. It's like, for example, if you wanted to attend a city council to hear what your city council's up to, do you think they could charge a cover charge for you to attend? It costs the city money to put on that meeting. So why not charge the people who attend those meetings to cover that so the others who don't attend don't have to? How about elections and voting? If I choose not to vote, why should my taxes go to pay for this expensive election? Only those who vote. If you vote, you should pay a fee to vote. So user fees are great for some things, but not for democratic participation. And accessing records is all about democratic participation, because we can't make decisions at the polls or elsewhere if we don't know what the government's doing. We have to see what's happening, and it's our right. And it should be built into the cost of doing business in a government agency. And tons of research shows that if they provide records for free, it's not going to cripple the government. Requests don't go up a whole lot. It's very manageable. It's the right thing to do. There are some countries that actually don't allow fees to be charged, and it works just fine. So again, fees really are used as a tool to make people go away for good reasons and bad. But we shouldn't be charging them at all. It's not fair to the average person. In fact, one study we came out with last couple months ago shows that people who are getting records in the public interest are highly frustrated by fees. Meanwhile, commercial users, which comprise most of public records requests, about 2/3, they're not bothered by it because, of course, they'll pay for the fees because they're making money off that information. It's worth it, pencils out. So they don't care. But people like journalists, nonprofits, the average people, it matters to them. And those are the requests that matter the most, that improve our society and our communities. So we have it a little backwards in this country, and we have to rethink that.
Amen. Preach it, brother. Good stuff. So, getting back to this political culture, this is a comment, and I think maybe I can address this, but from one of our attendees who writes, South Dakota's political culture has made it difficult for state employees who do care about this to get involved with FOIA groups outside of government, like you've recommended here. When we are literally tiptoeing around the governor's office, how do we get involved? Do you have resources for state employees specifically? And my response to that would be, feel free to contact South Dakota News Media Association. Feel free to contact me or my organization. I'll put my cell phone number and my email in the chat here, because quite honestly, and I'm not bragging, I'm not trying to toot a horn here extensively, but I will say, I think our organization is one of the very few, if not only, organization in South Dakota that really does act as an open government advocate. We have a long-standing history of working for better open government laws, whether it be in the open meetings or open records, as well as just trying to create a better environment for government transparency through our organization. And yes, at times it's like running up the hill and the rock tumbles us back down and we run back up, but we don't give up. So I would say our organization is a good resource for anyone who's looking to get involved or to try to make things better. And I'd be happy to assist anyone who reaches out and wants to do what they can and get some resources. I just want to segue real quick and interject here. A couple online resources in South Dakota which are good for open government issues. And because, to its credit, state government has done some really good things in recent years in terms of putting more information online. If you go to open.sd.gov, which is the state government's website, it has some good information related to the state budget, financial information, as well as boards and commissions, how to get agendas and so forth and access their work is there. The salaries of state employees are accessed through that website as well. And so open.sd.gov is a good state government portal to look at. Another one is the Attorney General's website has a good page related to open meetings law in South Dakota. So if you go to atg.sd.gov and under the legal resources tab is an open meetings page that has information about the Open Meetings Commission, as well as how the law is supposed to work related to open meetings in South Dakota. And then also a third resource is sdpublicnotices.com, which is a website that is hosted by our association in conjunction and partnership with all the newspapers in South Dakota. And that website contains an archive of all the public notices that have been first printed in newspapers in South Dakota. They are uploaded and archived to sdpublicnotices.com, which again can also be a useful tool in terms of researching, particularly in local government, school boards, city councils, county commissions, and so forth. So I would encourage you to look at those resources as well. Let me move on to a couple other quick questions here, if I could. Here's a question. I saw that in Fargo, North Dakota, the city council has proposed eliminating public comment at meetings came out of protest over the Gaza war. The Rapid City School Board also tried to end public comment after they went major right wing on their school board there. Is this a trend, something we should worry about? Is this something you've looked at, just researched at all, David, or thought about in terms of public comment at public meetings? It obviously is a hot button topic in itself across the country.
Yeah, it's become a major issue, and a lot of public bodies are grappling with it. I mean, to be fair, it has been troublesome for if you have a whole packed city hall and people shouting and taking up all the time, you can't do your business. So at the same time, you don't want to shut down public discussion. So it's something that different municipalities are trying to figure out how to deal with. I think there are always ways of inviting people to debate and discuss, but shutting down public comment time isn't the solution. One town in Florida actually passed an ordinance that prohibited the press from asking rude questions during a public meeting, and which was kind of bizarre, but it was targeted at one reporter they didn't like. So yeah, some of this is getting a little off kilter, and we have to figure out ways to keep that civic debate orderly, but yet open for people to express themselves.
Another question here comes, if we could pass a couple of new laws in South Dakota related to open government, what would they be? And perhaps, again, I can help with this as well. Well, there's a long list of things we would love to see adopted in South Dakota when related to strengthening open government. But one of the key areas would be related to the exceptions to the open records law. We have a laundry list of exceptions within the open records law that allow government to deny requests for government information. And often what you will see, if someone makes a request for a record or a set of data from a government office, the request, if it's denied, will come back with citing several of the exceptions that are crafted in the law. And it's almost as if the exceptions swallow the intent of the original intent of the law, which is the public's right to know, fundamental right to know what government is doing. And it's almost like a smorgasbord of exceptions, David, where they'll just say, well, we choose this exception, and this exception to deny your request. And you're sort of left like, my goodness, what, how could I ever win there? So my response is, that's one key area we would love to see addressed. Particularly, South Dakota does not allow access to official government correspondence, including government email. Many states that's commonplace, but oftentimes in South Dakota, when we've advocated for that in the legislature, I've talked to public officials about, look, official government correspondence should be a public record. You think we're talking from the moon. It seems to be such a foreign concept. And again, that gets back to sort of a political culture, I think, within our state, and it's something that's difficult to overcome. But that really is a terrible weakness within our law, because so much of what government does is transacted or conveyed through government official correspondence, often electronically. And to not have that access to that really creates a black hole in terms of being able to find key information. And I assume you would agree on that, David, as well.
Yeah, exemptions have eviscerated public record laws all around the country for decades, and they're particularly bad in South Dakota. That's why South Dakota rates so poorly in comparing the strength of the law to other states. It's one of the worst state laws in the country. But on top of that, mandatory fee shifting would go a long ways, like Illinois, Washington State, Florida, because then you don't have to hire an attorney. An attorney will say, hey, I'll take your case. That's slam dunk, and I get paid. So that's why it works so well in those states. Fines as well, hefty fines. An independent commission that I talked about. Those things would go a long ways to help the agencies enforce the law. So there's a lot that can be done.
I'm just looking at the Q&A here. How do you feel about voter registration list fees? Minnesota charges $46 for 3.2 million records, and South Dakota charges $2,500 for 640,000 records. South Carolina is free.
Well, should be free.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly they can provide that for free. The only reason they're charging is because they think they can make money off it to subsidize their budget. And there are some data sets government has that are valuable commercially. But the average person shouldn't be paying commercial fees to get information that helps them engage their government. So again, fees bad, and a barrier for people acting in the public's interest.
Totally agree here. David, we're coming up against the clock, but I want to finish with this question to you, because I think it's a very important one, is for the journalists who are online here listening or may listen later to the recording of this. And I will remind everyone, we are recording this session. I will make available the link to it afterward to all the participants and to the public as well as David's handouts here too will be shared. But this question is, what can we as journalists do, say to skeptical readers, to our audience, to convey why government openness is so important to them? And I think you've touched on it, but maybe you just want to kind of bring it all back to that point and why that is so important.
Yeah, I think journalists have a duty to tell the public when they're denied information. Often journalists see that as inside baseball and like, oh, I feel icky writing about our travails and getting public records. But the government's not saying no to the journalists. It's not about the journalists. It's about the public. Journalists are just proxies for the public. So when journalists are denied information, they should tell everybody in that community, hey, the city's not giving this out to us. So write stories about it and focus on why it matters to people and talk to people and ask them their thoughts. It's like there's a question in the chat and it's a really great question. Like, Dave, why did you bring up the age of the woman in New Jersey who was fined, 87 years old? How is that relevant? It's relevant because of this. When you humanize government overreach and secrecy and you paint a picture, people will respond. And when people wrote about this woman, a gadfly, but caring about her community, being blackballed and fined by the city, they had sympathy and they rose up and the city backed down and reneged on that and didn't fine her. So sometimes these stories are very powerful. And particularly if it's people on fixed income or, if it's a rich lawyer or corporation, people have little sympathy. But when you talk about average people who are just trying to get information, that really resonates. And I think that's what journalists should focus on. It's not a battle between the newspaper and the government. It's a battle for democracy in the republic and for people to know what their government's doing.
Very good. And then that's an excellent point to end this on. Once upon a time, South Dakota's slogan motto was the Sunshine State. I think we're the Mount Rushmore State. I think Florida is the Sunshine State. But here's to the good work that needs to be done and keep carrying the torch forward to make South Dakota a Sunshine State and get us a little bit higher in those rankings moving forward. David, I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with us this morning and talking about this important issue and topics of open government during Sunshine Week. We really appreciate you taking the time with us this morning.
Thanks for having me. And everybody, thanks for being here. Obviously, you care about this. So go forth and make the world better, one public record at a time.
Again, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for participating. And again, we will make the recording available as well as the handouts, the presentations that David shared with us this morning. So again, thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.